Hello, and welcome to the podcast Simple Enlightenment. I'm your host, Dean Graves. We come to you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. In the previous episode, we introduced the concepts of infinity, time-space, and space-time as experiential environments. Infinity is the all-encompassing environment of 8th and 7th density. Time-space is the environment of 6th density and within the envelope of infinity. And space-time is the environment created by 1st density within the envelope of time-space, but shared to decreasing degrees by 2nd through 5th density. Evolution through the lower 5 densities is a transformation process that starts with the absolute perception of space-time authenticity in 1st density, but declines in increments until it achieves reunification with 6th density consciousness and the perception of the time-space environment. The perception of the authenticity of physicality is an effect of the 1st density, the lowest and most basic range of consciousness with the most significant distortions. Knowing how these environments are formed helps with the understanding of the nature of consciousness experiences in each density. Infinity, the 8th density environment, is indistinguishable from the consciousness of 8th density because the nature of its consciousness is its own environment. This is also true of time-space, the 6th density environment, but because time-space emanates from a lower level of consciousness and vibration than 8th density, it is much easier for the experiential densities to reach. The ability to experience infinity or time-space is always available to all consciousness, regardless of the density, but the awareness constraints characteristic of the foundational densities and the lower dimensions of 3rd density make it very difficult to do so. The space-time environment is the product of 1st density and a reflection of how it has developed a unique pattern of consciousness. So space-time environments vary enormously. The uniqueness of a space-time environment is a demonstration of the infinite variety afforded by free will, because all consciousness begins 1st density in exactly the same condition as any other, but even within the limits of our own solar system, there is significant variety in a planet's formation. Space-time serves as the basis for experiences of densities 2 through 5 and significantly contributes to how it evolves within the environment. The design of 1st density is that consciousness will begin without light, which is information, and its capacities of awareness suppressed through a series of limiting mechanisms to allow it to begin at a near zero point, characterized as primordial darkness. Through alternating roles of subject and object interactions with itself, it integrates into 4 unique patterns of consciousness that initially coalesce into an independent organism of an equivalent consciousness level, and then continues to coalesce into a larger comprehensive organism called a planet, which is a larger unique pattern of consciousness that functions with a cohesive codependence. This begins evolution with the common intent of allowing the Creator to know itself by experiencing itself at a 1st density level. Remember that creation is a thought experiment in process, made possible through a series of distortions of the Creator by the Creator. 1st density begins with consciousness in the most intoxicated state possible, and through interactions with itself, learns to integrate into an organism that functions in relative unity with the other first density consciousness, sharing the experience. The coalescence of first density is a demonstration of consciousness escalation within the density, and portends the participating first density consciousness's imminent graduation to second density. Space-time, also known as the physical world, is the manifestation of consciousness's evolution within the density and is an expression of relative unity. Before first density begins, the criteria for a universe's experiences is established by selecting one or more archetypes from a pool of archetypes consisting of the 5 inherent characteristics: La, Ra, Ka, Sa, and Ya, including Melchizedek, or free will, and 26 archetypical distortions, all of which are of a 6th-density consciousness. From this pool of 32 archetypes, chosen participants are mixed and matched in varying combinations to populate universes and create opportunities for the Creator's exploration of itself. The particular universe that Earth participates in is composed of 9 of these archetypes: the 5 inherent characteristics, Melchizedek, free will, and 3 distortion archetypes: Ta, which is separation, Da, which is movement, and Lucifer, which is unconsciousness. Every star is home to a 6th-density archetype, and our universe began with a single 9-star system, 1 star for each of the archetypes that were chosen to comprise our universe. Each member of the original star system primarily interacted with the other 8 to form a unique star system pattern of consciousness, and prompting the entire star system to bond and function as a single organism. The initial 9-star system served as a seed to further populate the universe, and when the concept of manyness was applied to the initial seed system, it resulted in an infinite number of other seed systems to populate the universe. Each of the replicated seed systems also developed its own unique pattern of consciousness according to its subject-object interactions, and functioning as a single organism. In addition to the replication of the 9-star seed systems, the seed systems themselves sponsored other 9-star systems according to their own uniqueness, with each replicated system refining the sponsoring system's characteristics into its own uniqueness, which resulted in the galaxies. Each galaxy shares the foundational racial mind of the sponsoring 9-star system. The 9-star seed system is a single organism which grew into an even larger galaxy organism that is part of an even larger universe organism. The uniqueness of a universe is the result of the accumulated personalities of its galaxies, and the uniqueness of the galaxies is a product of the personalities of the 9-star systems within it. The 6th-density consciousness of the stars explores itself by investing itself into soul streams, which mature into solar systems by populating the lower 5 densities, so they may have experiences and develop uniqueness through analogy. Planets are comprised of the lower 5 densities, and the accumulated uniqueness of the consciousness participating in the planets accrues to the originating 6th-density consciousness occupying a star. Consciousness participates in the lower 5 densities through personal experience by the processing of thought, allowing uniqueness to begin from a near-zero starting point and incrementally progress to unity, thought by thought. How this is facilitated will be the focus of the explanation of the lower densities. Project consciousness to populate the lower densities according to its racial mind. Other than the archetypes Lucifer and Melchizedek, the 6th-density archetypes occupying individual stars within a galaxy project consciousness to populate the lower densities according to its rational mind, eventually resulting in the manifestation of a series of planets, which we call a solar system. Consciousness can either be projected to populate only first density to allow the evolution of consciousness to populate densities 2 through 5, or it can be distributed to all 5 lower densities simultaneously. The mechanism of how to scale consciousness to the appropriate density was briefly addressed in Episode 4, and it will be explained in greater detail at the appropriate time in a future episode. A star that is home to one archetypical aspect is predominantly that aspect, but is also inclusive of all of the other 8 archetypes, but to a less prominent degree. The bias towards one archetype, while still incorporating all of the other archetypes to a lesser degree, is the same design for all of the archetypes comprising our universe. Initially, a star is home to only one 6th-density entity and is one mind, but as evolution welcomes more evolved individual souls back to its 6th-density origin, after its progression through the lower densities, it becomes a social memory complex. A social memory complex consists of a number of individuated souls or patterns of consciousness who have greatly surrendered their perception of separation and function as one mind and one organism, but with multiple individual contributing parts, each adding the uniqueness of their own patterns of consciousness to diversify and expand the whole organism. Because galaxies grow from a seed, the 9 star systems at the center of a galaxy are usually the oldest and most evolved within the 6th-density range. The 9 star system we participate in is located near the outer edge of the Milky Way galaxy and, therefore, is relatively youthful and more innocent relative to that consciousness near the center. The size of the galaxy is often an indication of both the seniority and the power of originating consciousness. While a single galaxy may be grown from a single 9 star system's experiences, it always is the result of the consciousness of many 9 star systems functioning cooperatively and diversely, but always harmoniously to create the whole galaxy. Most stars are in a binary orbit with another star, but in our solar system, the Sun, home to the 6th-density archetype law, or wisdom, has been an exception to this until fairly recently. Besides the Sun, the other 8 stars that participate in our star system includes Sirius B, which is home to Ra, or love, Sirius A, home to Ta, or separation, Alpha Centauri A, home to Ta, or separation, Alpha Centauri B, home to Sa, or awareness, Cephus A, which is home to Ya, or unity, Cephus B, Melchizedek, or free will, Zeta Reticula A, home to Ka, or stillness, and Zeta Reticula B, which is home to Lucifer, or unconsciousness. The aspect of Ra that has called Sirius B a home is in the process of graduating to 7th density, and the star is in the process of transitioning to a black hole, which occurs when a 6th density archetypical social memory complex graduates to 7th density and begins to absorb all of the consciousness and energy it has invested into a particular 9 star system. A new star, to be the new home of the aspect of Ra that will continue to participate in our star system, is forming in a binary orbit with the Sun, and Sirius A will assume a solitary orbit. Physicality first appears sometime after a star's 6th density aspect invests consciousness to begin a soul stream, and the consciousness of 1st density adequately matures to coalesce into a planet. 1st density is the most basic foundational density, which begins at the lowest level of consciousness and starts the process of evolution. Consciousness is prepared for the density by significantly increasing free will intoxication and establishing a minimal flow of intelligent energy. Consciousness, experiencing densities 1 through 7, participates in creation according to a coding scale consisting of 64 steps with 2 layers activated at a time. The highest activated numbers indicate higher consciousness and the least free will intoxication, and the lower numbers indicate the lowest consciousness and the greatest free will intoxication. First density ranges from only 2 strands of coding activated to 8 strands. A first density experience initially distributes consciousness among the 4 coding levels, 2, 4, 6, and 8, creating 4 platform levels of consciousness within the density, but with the fractional layers between the platform layers being further subdivided into an infinite number of dimensions. While initially the strands of coding are assigned by the higher self, the design is that all consciousness will incrementally evolve through all of the intervening dimensions and platform layers of the density by surrendering its free will intoxication, incrementally increasing its awareness, integrating more completely into the planetary organism, and evolving to higher consciousness. Consciousness participating in the lowest range of consciousness with only 2 strands of coding activated will evolve through the intervening dimensions to attain the next platform layer of 4 strands within the density. The same activity prevails within the whole density until consciousness has achieved 10 strands of coding, which moves it into the lowest range of second density. Evolution of consciousness is designed to be incremental, allowing consciousness to explore itself and consequently learn of itself at each dimension. While most consciousness works incrementally within a density and is permitted to progress at its own pace, it is fairly common that consciousness may be scooped out of the first density pool and the coding activated to a new setting on the coding scale by the grace of the higher self, which allows consciousness to participate in a new higher level density without having completed its full evolutionary tenure at the lower levels. Dimensions and densities may be skipped entirely, and the recalibrated consciousness will promptly demonstrate behavior relatively similar to all other consciousness of similar coding activation. Consciousness in the foundational densities experience creation in bulk and evolves into the more narrowly focused experience of third density that we currently enjoy as a population and are all familiar with. We, who experience the human range of consciousness, perceive ourselves to be a single unit of consciousness, otherwise identified as an independent mind, body, spirit. But a single unit of consciousness for first density consciousness is as an element. Consciousness with only 2 strands of coding activated is deemed to be charged positively, is a male or the subject experience, and eventually manifests as the space-time element of fire. Consciousness is naturally attracted to other consciousness of equivalent coding activation and tends to coalesce accordingly. Behavior at any level of consciousness is characteristic of the level of consciousness, even in higher densities, and consciousness's behavior with 2 strands of coding activated behaves according to the properties of the element of fire. Negatively charged first density consciousness is female, or the object, and eventually manifests as planetary matter in all of its various forms because of dimensional diversity. Matter begins with 8 strands of coding activated, which, as with fire, advances incrementally from dimension to dimension between 8 and 10 strands of coding. 10 strands is the beginning of second density. Consciousness within the first density range evolves from the lower levels to the higher levels, transforming itself, including its behavior and appearance, in the process as it experiences the different forms in between fire and matter. Matter and fire are the two most polarized elements, and there are two more levels which are less extreme in their polarization, but still characteristically male as the subject or female as the object. Water is polarized as a plus sign over a negative sign, and is weighted more towards the subject or male consciousness, but still consisting partly of the female polarity. Atmosphere results from consciousness charged with a negative sign over a positive sign, which is weighted towards the object or female bias, but also incorporates characteristics of the male polarity. The polarity distortions of first density are biases that begin experiences way before anything physical manifests, and are expressions of degrees of perceptual separation from the Creator. Matter, the negatively charged female or object polarity, perceives of itself closest to the Creator relative to the other levels of first density consciousness. Fire, the positively charged male or subject polarity, perceives itself farther from the Creator. There is absolutely nothing sexual or reproductive about the identification of male or female intended other than the degree of perception of separation from the Creator. As will be explained in greater detail in future episodes, the male or subject and female or object roles of the higher foundational and experiential densities are also based upon the degree of perception of separation from the Creator, most notably in third density. Water, polarized as a plus sign over a negative sign, is skewed towards the male subject polarization being less positive than fire, but more positive than atmosphere. Atmosphere, polarized as a negative sign over a plus sign, is skewed towards the female or object polarization, being less negative than matter, but more negative than water. The elements of first density experience creation as one torus and one mind. In other words, water is one torus and one mind, atmosphere is one torus and one mind, fire is one torus and one mind, and matter is also one torus and one mind. The water in your drinking glass, although it appears to be isolated within the glass, is still part of the one torus and one mind of water. Consciousness in first density is assigned its polarity, but from that starting point it creates a range of perceptual separation within the element based upon analogy or what feels right. Each element coalesces into an organism of shared perceptual separation, demonstrating the behavior associated with the element. And the four parts then coalesce into a larger organism which integrates the four elements and appears or behaves as the physical element that we perceive with our senses. The appearance of physical form is the naturally occurring behavioral characteristic of first density consciousness, as it has chosen its degree of perceptual separation. Each element may seem electrically charged, but the electrical nature of the charge is actually how the lower level of consciousness, the element, is interpreting and filtering the intelligent energy provided by the source star. Once first density consciousness reaches a relative degree of maturity and begins to form the larger element organism, it develops the physical appearance of the gases that science has identified as the beginning of a planet. But the gases are actually the small units of the elements that have not yet coalesced. Within all of the 5 lower densities, the design is for consciousness to shed its perception of separation and incrementally join together in ever-increasing unity. The appearance of the physical is an indication of the escalation of consciousness within first density, as it eventually unites to form the larger planetary organism. When consciousness coalesces into the 4 organisms, they are demonstrating their pattern of consciousness. When the four elements come together to form a larger planetary organism, inclusive of the four parts, they are forming yet another, larger, more complex pattern of consciousness. The elements continue to coalesce until they become a planet that will be totally unique and reflect the characteristics of their pattern. Planets are all different in appearance and composition because, while the nature of the experience may be similar to all other first-density experiences, the four elements have employed free will to interpret them and therefore shape their uniqueness. The space-time environment is the inevitable result of consciousness's coalescence into a planet, because that is the behavioral characteristic of first density, but the specific blending of the four elements will be unique because the free will of the participating consciousness determines its appearance as a planet. Coalescence is a behavior, and all consciousness will demonstrate very similar behavior if it shares the same level of dimensionality, or consciousness. The uniqueness isn't that it coalesced, but in the resulting characteristics of the space-time environment. Interactions between the elements of the lowest density are random, timeless, and encourage diversity in the co-creation of the space-time environment. The creator being densities were created from a top-down approach by intoxicating consciousness with additional free will, which means that they retain significant intelligence and light, even though they are a reduced fractal of the density above. First density was formed by starting in primordial darkness at the bottom of the consciousness scale, which means it has little or no access to intelligence or information at its beginning. The four elements of first density randomly interact, discovering intelligence and information as consciousness learns of itself and surrenders its perception of separation. First density's experience is also the beginning of a soul stream, and in our universe originates with the racial mind of one of the 7 of the 9 archetypes. Melchizedek and Lucifer do not originate soul streams, but they participate in every experience created by the other archetypes. It is possible, and not uncommon, for one 6th-density archetype to begin a soul stream and another to assume the higher self role while it is still in progress. In fact, this is the case for a significant number of soul streams comprising the Earth experience. Once consciousness enters first density, it doesn't have the capacity to experience time-space until it graduates into second density. First density's point of perception is always incarnate and constantly interacting with the other elements within the space-time environment that it created through its incarnation. In the minds of first density, the authenticity of the physical is irrefutable, but very myopic, because that is the nature of a first density consciousness. As consciousness is elevated within the density, consciousness rises to the top and is skimmed from the pool of consciousness, just like cream that has floated to the top of milk is skimmed from the bucket. The skimmed consciousness is then moved to second density to continue its evolutionary journey. The criterion for consciousness escalation in first density is the same as it is in all the densities and requires the surrender of free will, resulting in its sobering from its free will intoxication. Everything we experience through our 5 senses as space-time is first density consciousness and is as alive and incarnate as we are. The nature of its service to the Creator may seem more elementary than in higher densities, but it is integral to fulfilling the purpose of creation. The collective consciousnesses of atmosphere, water, earth, and fire are still individual patterns of consciousness, intelligent and able to telepathically communicate with other consciousness willing to exert the effort to do so. As a 3rd or 4th density mind-body spirit on Earth, we have the capacity to telepathically chat with an elemental consciousness, as we are willing to exert the effort to be adequately aware. Consciousness that is virgin to the creation process is constantly being reinvested into first density by resetting its coding to the lowest setting, but it mingles and interacts with all consciousness that shares the planetary experience. Interactions of the consciousness levels within the densities serve as the stimulus to raise the consciousness of the lower levels more quickly. Every interaction of every pattern of consciousness is a teach-learn and learn-teach opportunity, no matter the level of consciousness. Every aspect of consciousness serves as either a subject or the object in every encounter. There are several examples of planets that are in the process of first density maturity within our own solar system that have not yet hosted a density experience other than its own. Jupiter, Mercury, Neptune, and Saturn are all examples of varying levels of first-degree maturity that have not yet been ready or chosen to host a density experience beyond the first. Saturn and its moons frequently host higher consciousness visits, but not as the host planet for a density experience other than its own first density experience. Planets closest to the creating star are usually the most mature, and therefore appear to be the densest and most physically formed. Once first density has matured into a planet, the planet can, and usually does, cooperatively host more than one density experience at a time. For example, Mars currently is a first and fourth density experience, and Venus is a first and fifth density experience. Earth is simultaneously a first, second, and now fourth density planet, and has served as a host planet for the third density experience that was just completed, the one we have been a part of. Also, there is another planet called Tara, T-A-R-A, in our solar system, on the same orbit as Earth on the opposite side of the Sun, that has simultaneously been host to a first, second, third, fourth, and fifth density experience. In order for a planet to host an experiential density, significant additional changes must take place beyond the criterion of a first or second density experience. In earlier episodes, we presented the irrefutable fact that all is one, which is the statement of truth known as the law of one. Everything is the Creator experiencing itself. The distinction between the densities and subdivision of dimensions is always awareness. Free will, or the perception of separation, is a distortion that convolutes awareness by causing the portion of the Creator experiencing creation, identified as consciousness, to perceive of itself as separate from the Creator, with reduced access to intelligence, thereby narrowing its focus. Eighth density has the awareness of the Creator, that it is one with the Creator, except for the distortion that it perceives of itself as a separate identity. Each declining density holds less awareness of the fact that it is the Creator experiencing itself, without distinction, and because of its increasing lack of awareness, it loses the creative and intelligence capabilities of the Creator accordingly. First density consciousness is as much the Creator as eighth density, but because of its inability to be aware, it perceives of itself as completely separate and existing only as the environment of a physical element within a physical world of its own creation. Its mind remains in time-space because it is still part of its higher self's mind, but distorted to perceive that it is absolutely separate. The nature of its perception of separation results in the creation of a space-time environment and its inability to be aware even of its simultaneous existence in time-space. It is the mind or minds of first density that remain in time-space, as all minds do, that holds its perspectives and creates the environment of space-time. Consciousness experiences first through seventh density as a mind-body-spirit. Because of the limited capacity of consciousness in first and/or second density, the spirit that is part of the foundational densities is the spirit of the higher self, but spirit shall remain inaccessible to a mind-body-spirit's mind until it progresses adequately within third density. The mind is the perception of separation, as shaped by its experiences, or, in other words, its ego. The body in first density is the manifestation of the physical form appropriate for its coding activation. The mind, or ego, processes thoughts and perceives the physical manifestation to be a representation of the information provided in thought. First density consciousness isn't born and doesn't die. It is always incarnate, experiencing space-time while it remains in a first density range of consciousness, and so there is no opportunity to experience anything other than its incarnate self as one of the elements. Because of its perceptual limitations, it only knows space-time. And all change or escalation of dimensionality must occur within the environment by its incarnate self. It is permissible that first density consciousness can awaken to its perceptual limitations, surrender its free will intoxication, and zip through to eighth density consciousness by skipping all of the intervening levels of consciousness, but that is highly improbable, and it's not the design. The design of evolution in all the densities is to incrementally have experiences at every dimension, and through experience and analogy, create a unique personality, thereby allowing the creator to infinitely experience itself and consequently know itself. In rare cases, first density consciousness can sometimes exceed the expectations of the design when it has the opportunity to experience higher consciousness through direct contact with higher consciousness beings. For example, there are locations on Earth where higher consciousness beings have dwelt for prolonged periods of time, and the interaction of the first density consciousness with the higher consciousness being has elevated that portion of the first density consciousness beyond its prescribed level. Humans can recognize these locations because the energy of the location feels really good. The portion of first density consciousness that has benefited from interactions with a higher positively charged consciousness being results in more consciousness cream rising to the top of consciousness milk to be scooped out and deposited in a higher density. A similar condition occurs when first density consciousness in a location has experienced interactions with lower negatively polarized consciousness for a prolonged period of time. The distinction of positively or negatively polarized beings will be explained as part of our third density presentation. In summary, consciousness can only experience what it is aware of. Because first density's capacity for awareness is very limited, it can only experience the physical world, which is space-time. The single mind of its organism continues to exist in time-space, but it is completely unaware of anything other than its incarnate physical world experience. Therefore, it experiences only space-time until such time as it is scooped out of first density and into second density, and even then it experiences time-space only between incarnation. Stay with us for the next episode where we describe and explain second density. Consciousness's experience of second density is dramatically different than first density, and it gets even more interesting as we get closer to our own current experience of creation. Earth-based humans are experiencing a very great opportunity for consciousness escalation because the planet identified as Gaia has transitioned from third density to fourth density, and is providing the entire population with the opportunity to do the same. As always, we thank you for listening and wanting to make the world a better place. If you are enjoying Simple Enlightenment and would like to see us continue to offer more information, we encourage you to help us by financially supporting what we are doing. The actual recording is only a small part of the effort to bring you this information, and unfortunately, most of the other stuff takes money. Please enable us to continue providing information and improve the product that we deliver by going to podcastenlightenment.org to make a contribution.